start the tasting officially. So welcome everyone to tonight's virtual tasting with the guys from Thomson Whisky in New Zealand. I always have to say from New Zealand because I said Thomson to somebody and they're like, Thomson Brothers? And I'm like, no, Thomson, no P. But we are joined by Matt Thompson, one of the founders behind this incredible distillery, which is new to us, but any Kiwis kicking about in the chat might be familiar with the brand already. Quick show of hands before we start. Is this your first time trying Thomson whiskey? Rob, Paul, Chris, Rob, who is under Haley's name today, actually worked the stand up in Brisbane. So, you know, is well acquainted with the brand. I love that. Cool. All right. So new for a couple of people, but well versed for others. Easy. Well, firstly, new change of events. You guys might have seen our virtual tasting housekeeping video that we shared in the Zoom link email. Tongue twister there. It obviously goes over my usual pointers as 6 glasses if you have them. If you don't, that's fine. Please don't drink and drive. All the important elements needed. If you haven't had the chance to watch it, please do at some point, or if you ever need a refresher for any of our tastings. But tonight I'm going to start off by going through the tasting order verbally so that people at home watching back on YouTube can have a heads up of what it is. So the tasting order is as follows. Whiskey number 1 is the two-tone blended. Then it's on to the Cask Martin French Oak. Whiskey number 3 is the Alio single cask. Number 4 is the Manuka Smoke Single Malt. Number 5 is the South Island Peat Single Malt. And number 6 is the Full Noise Manuka Smoke Single Malt. I feel like I had to add a word every time I went on to the next one there. But yeah, well, I won't delay too much. I'm super excited to get into these whiskeys. I got the chance to sit down with Rachael, the other co-founder, and interview her recently up in Sydney. So that should be up on the TWL website shortly. But yeah, learning more about the brand made me fall in love with the craftsmanship that goes into this. And I can't wait to hear from Matt a little bit more about that. So if everyone wants to tuck into the two-tone blend, I'll hand it over to him so he can tell us all about how Thomson Whisky started.
Oh, all right. Thanks a lot, Emma. Nice introduction there. Thank you. This is quite exciting for me. This is my first Australian virtual whiskey tasting. So yeah, I'm excited to do this. In fact, it's actually my first proper online whiskey tasting ever. Actually, we've discussed. I've had Zoom meetings and we've discussed whiskeys, but formally like this, this is the first for me. So the two-tone blend. This is a historic whiskey for us. So Thomson Whisky started back in 2009, and I started selecting old stock New Zealand whiskey. We'll go through the flavors of this, and then we'll talk about the history, I think, a bit. So this is a blended whiskey. And it's got it's called two-tone because it's aged in 2 kinds of cask: American oak ex-bourbon barrels and New Zealand wine casks. Now we don't go hugely winey with the wine casks, in that this is our entry-level whiskey, and this is meant to be like a smooth sipping any time of day, really approachable, sort of like by everyone kind of whiskey. And it is a blend, but it's all malt as well, although it's the malt's been through a column still, so part of the malt's been through a column still. So consequently, the legs are really good. The mouth feels really good. Nose, apricot, stone fruit, marzipan, malt biscuits, and squashed. The key, it's squashed banana, but squashed fresh banana, not overly ripe banana. That's the key. Palate, apricots again, stone fruits, bit of tannin. Then the finish, you're getting a bit of, more of the tannin, I think. So the how this whiskey came into being was that New Zealand's actually got quite a long distilling history. There were two reasonable sized distilleries in the 1860s. Um, uh, and we won't go into that for now, but this comes from the legacy of a distillery that started in 1967. The first whiskey was released in 1970, 71, I think, which was Wilson's Distillery, and they started making a single malt in 1981, 1980, 1981, something like that, called Lamalore. They ended up being bought by Seagram's of Canada, which was one of the biggest spirits companies in the world at that time. And in the late 90s, they sold off their international interests, which included this distillery. So it finished, but with quite a bit of stock. So someone from a winery called Mills Reef purchased the remaining stock in New Zealand and put a lot into wine casks. And so it was from that I was picking through when I was starting selecting old New Zealand whiskey. We were picking, actually, if I've got some around here. Coincidentally, this was our first release, was a 17-year-old, and we had an 11-year-old blend, which was really amazing because it was amazing to be able to start in my whiskey journey by selecting really, well-crafted, nice old whiskey. However, being this old was quite hard, well, it's quite expensive, and obviously someone else owned it all and was planning on using it to start their distillery. So we had access to some that had been in wine casks, and it had been in the wine cask for a bit too long, to be honest, and it was overcooked in the wine. But we found that actually by blending it, we came up with this great product, which extended our range and was a really nice, smooth, light whiskey, which filled the gap because we were starting with a 17-year-old single cask, which was quite up there for a price point wise for a starting out whiskey maker. And this gave us a crowd pleaser that worked really well. So we've kept this as part of the legacy of the beginning of Thomson Whisky, was selecting and blending, and so that's the history of Two Tone, and it's a great sort of part of our range. Anyone got any questions?
Yeah, I think we got tasting note in chat already. Michael's getting a bit of fruit on the nose and palate, very little winey notes from me. I'm getting kind of like a white wine acid, when you get a really lovely, pretty Riesling and it's got
Yeah,
that malic acid,
exactly.
tartaric acid kind of thing to it. So the other malt that you're blending with it, is it from another distillery? Is it from that old parcel that you got from?
This is no longer, we no longer use the historic the historic New Zealand whiskey. It's our whiskey, and then it's whiskey that we've imported, which we get it from Scotland. We select it and bring it from Scotland. I can't say that on the bottle, but I can say that. I can openly say that. I mean,
This is definitely not being recorded. No one will ever find out.
no, you just can't say it on the bottle, but I mean, may as well be honest about it. Now, the thing with New Zealand is that maybe there's 8 running distilleries and they're all fairly small. So there's no blending stock left really. There's no big producers of grain whiskey. And although this ends up being quite an expensive blend to produce, because we're relatively small scale, I think it's worth spending rather than getting kind of cheaper products in to blend with. We're better off kind of spending the money and putting out something really good. So that's the process. I mean, there's a number of places you can buy a blending whiskey from in the world. And there were a few distilleries that we talked to in Scotland, and then we found these whiskies that we really liked and worked for us. So so that's what we've done. You know, conceptually, it would be nicer that it was all New Zealand whiskey, maybe, but that doesn't that yeah. There's no grain whiskey here for us to blend with, and our stills are quite short. You know, we create quite an oily spirit, and to create a kind of lighter floral blend, then it was necessary to bring in whiskey. So we brought in sort of the best whiskey that we could, and that's it's worked really well for us. Yeah, it is particular crowd pleaser any time of day. Like, it's great. I mean, I don't normally drink
Yeah.
whiskey in the morning, but I would if I was going snowboarding. You know,
You gotta prepare
that's the one
yourself.
time when I would drink whiskey for work, like if we're tasting whiskey, but I wouldn't get up like and drink whiskey normally in the morning. But I do like to have a little hip flask with me when I'm snowboarding. And I do find getting on the chairlift and stuff and having a dram pretty good.
Yeah, that's,
And
if
for
they're on
that,
the
I take
chairlift, they
this way.
can't catch you.
We always joke that this is our breakfast whiskey. Like if we're doing a trade show or something, so we're there from like 9 o'clock, you know, like whatever it is, home and garden show or whatever. Like this is our breakfast whiskey, you know, because it's made from cereal. Like so, it's the one to start the day with. I mean, they're all made from cereal, but
No, I love that. This is for me, this is one of those whiskey I call it, it's not a thinking whiskey. And that's a good thing a lot of the time. Like, you don't have to think about it. Your brain doesn't want to write a thesis about it. Your brain's just like, oh, I can just enjoy this and, not have to pick it apart. And don't get me wrong, I love complex whiskeys that are like full PhD analysis whiskeys. But most of the time, every day, if I'm reaching for a glass of something, this is what I want. I want something I can just whack it in a cocktail, whack it in a drink, have it neat, and not have to, feel challenged by my whiskey, and just feel like it's there for me. It's a comforting presence.
exactly. The other one, this is the only one in our range that's 40% as well. But that's in terms of introducing people to whiskey, you don't want to hit them with full noise Manuka Smoke or 46, because people try it and then don't know how much water to add, whereas 40 is really approachable. So it really it really works for us to have, smooth, light 40% whiskey. It's really good.
Yeah, Barry said it's got a nice sweet woody note remaining in the glass at the end. Absolutely. Well, speaking of woody,
Earl Grey tea, sorry. In the finish, a little bit of Earl Grey tea.
yeah, that kind of like sweet bitter herbal note. I love it. A matinee whiskey, says Rob. I love that. I will be using that. Speaking of woody, we might move on to whiskey number 2, the Cask Martin French Oak.
And
And
the two-tone, it's got the infinity, which is kind of like 2 barrels. That was the idea.
it was a little superstition thing, was it?
Actually, there was a while when there was one 8-year-old whiskey that we had, and we used to historically, and I'll open this one, we used to hand stamp all the labels because we'd get a print run done of 1,000 shells, and then hand stamp in the bottom detail there. And I had one that was an 8, and I put it on its side. It was like, yeah.
New, innovative, like
Yeah.
quirky. I love that. So tell us a little bit more about how you guys kind of made the transition from bottling that old heritage whiskey towards making your own. Like, what kind of was it? You found the whiskey, bottled it, were inspired, and then started making your
So
own?
I was always into whiskey. Coincidentally, I joined an Irish band when I was in my last year of school. I used to like when I was 17, play in Irish pubs 3 days a week, right through when I was at university as well. So we used to drink whiskey at band practice, but I liked whiskey before that, and I used to take my lunch to school actually in an old Glenfiddich tin when I was, like, I don't know, 15 or something. Uh, and what happened? a friend and I built a home still, and this is back in 2005. Built a home still, and it was really good actually, because you can buy stills in New Zealand from the homebrew shop, but I didn't know that. And so we built a still. I went to the homebrew shop to purchase malt, and saw that actually you could buy a still. But because we'd built it, then I built Mark II after that, and we could adjust it. And so I was sort of confident to work on a still. Um, uh, and yeah, so what happened was, we'd bought our 2 casks of whiskey and some wine cask aged whiskey, got it on the shelf for Christmas 2009, and then a few months after that, the next year, we had a big list. We'd actually gone to Oamaru, where the whiskey was, twice. Had been through 100 or so casks. And then I called Warren Preston, the then owner, and the phone went through to the receivers, and he had obviously gone under, and the receivers would only sell the whole lot or none. And so I didn't really know about raising money. Plus, our strike rate was only about 1 in 12 of what we wanted to bottle. And really, I wanted to be my own story, and and so Australian investors bought it actually, and they called themselves the New Zealand Whisky Company. Which was a slight insult to me, I found, as a New Zealander, and they weren't the only New Zealand whiskey company. But what was great about that is that I then had to kind of put my money where my mouth was and start a distillery, or my stock was going to run out. Because I'd sort of thought, oh wow, it would be really hard to start a distillery, and I don't know if I could do it. But we had the start of a brand, and so what I did was I was looking at what was going on. Balcones in the States and Stauning were both using Hogger stills, which we imported one of. And we'll go to this whiskey now, so we've got something else to drink. So, which this is one of the results of that. So, Cask Martin.
So Cask Martin was kind of like
which is this
one of the early experiments and whatnot that you were doing.
Yeah, this is a oh, this actually related to Two Tone. I when we did the lineup, I actually didn't think to say that. So this is a wine cask, but it would have had Two Tone in it first. It would have had whiskey matured in the cask, or partially matured in the cask, to pull off the initial wine notes, so that you're getting kind of more subtle, deeper oak. Because you don't thing with wine cask aging is if you've got a glass of red wine and a glass of whiskey, so if you've got a glass of whiskey and a glass of sherry, like, probably good. Glass of wine, glass of whiskey, probably not so good. They're not a flavor match that is necessarily going to go together. And so shave toasting, charring, or putting whiskey in there for a quick maturation to pull off the wine notes, then putting into a bourbon barrel, things like that, mitigate the sort of too wininess. Plus, having a relationship with the winemaker and getting casks that aren't too old, that are really fresh. And we've got 3 wineries within 10 kilometers of the distillery that we use. So there's hints of smoke in the Cask Martin because we are actually primarily a smoky whiskey distillery. Now, what the keynotes for Cask Martin are orange. Or we wrote official notes this week, so I wasn't making it up as I go along like I normally do.
No, so, I love it. And please pop your tasting notes in the chat, guys. I've already been delving into this, and it's
the official really notes for this are raspberry tart, jam, barley sugars. I don't know if you get those sweets in Australia, but
I'm quite sensitive to the dryness of French oak. So like, even if it is an X wine or virgin French oak cask or whatever it happens to be, I always get this like it's a lovely dryness, but it's that that really kind of dehydrated raspberries kind of thing, where it's that tart but dry. It's not sweet, it's not juicy, but it is still fruity. Yeah, I get a lot of that kind of tone to it.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. There's a little bit of kind of squeak on the tongue from the oak, but not hugely. And then there's notes like flat Fanta, like imitation orange we were getting in this, which I thought was funny. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, just a really nice, smooth, kind of sweet expression. Um, it's my cousin actually owns a bar called Bar Martin, which is a wine bar, and we joked that we should do a cask Martin, which we did, and it sold really well.
Is he still got any bottles left on the bar, or are they all sold out?
Yeah, there's a couple hanging around, but that the bar hasn't been open for that long, and it got us a good spot in the paper. So that was good. But yeah, I really like this. 46%, and we um we normally have a revolving single cask release, so we do 3 of those a year. So we've got something that's sort of finite and is an expression of that time and place.
I noticed with the Cast Martin's 46% and then the Ellio's 48. Do you tend to like try and keep it around that 46 to 50 for the single cask range, or is it kind of a bit of a uh
We've always done I've set everything to 46 historically, because I'm so used to that with drinking Ardbeg and think 46 is quite a standard release for Scotch, and so for me, I nose it, taste it, then I know exactly the right amount of water to add. So so I put very little value in cask strength and doing specific ABVs for specific whiskies. We normally just go to 46. And then I guess I just thought, maybe they're getting a bit weak at 46. We'll just up it to 48 for the Allier. As well, full noise that we'll get to. I'd always gone, there's not much point in having a cask strength release, but because it's fine at 46%, isn't it? But actually, I do think there's real value in the cask strength. I do, there is some magic when you try it cask strength and then lower it down to the ABV that you like yourself. I do think the taste is better for it.
Yeah, I think that the Australian demographic tends to, I mean, obviously you guys can correct me in the chat if I'm wrong, but I think the Australian palate definitely leans towards more cask strength, higher ABV whiskies, that real like rich, bombastic profile. Yeah, Barry says definitely 46 plus. Rob says we're Alcos, yes. It's a classically, I don't know, Aussie thing. I'm sure that the rum rebellions of the early days in Australia probably had something to do with the Australian feeling towards high ABV. But yeah, love the notes. Michael's getting a bit of Jaffa. I get a little bit of pasito, like that fake passion fruit flavor profile as well, now that it's kind of like in that last lingering bit. Yeah, Tom prefers 46 to 50% in his opinion. Yeah, fair enough. Michael says it also has a bit of spice to finish. Barry asked a question: did you blend a number of wine casks for this final one, or this is a single?
No, it's a single cask.
Single
It's a
cask.
single cask. It's finite. Yeah.
Yeah. So is being surrounded by so many wineries, is that something you're going to do kind of consistently for the brand? Is sourcing a single
yeah. We've got some great Chardonnay. We're actually in a Chardonnay region, and it turns out that Chardonnay, I haven't done historically. I'd always used red wine for smoky whiskey, but I did one white wine one years ago, and then when I tried it years later, I was like, oh, actually, it's really good. Should do more of those. But yeah, it works really well. You need a small winery where see if a winery is dumping hundreds of barrels, well, sure, they don't care about selling me 12 and keeping them in good condition for that. But if they're, if they're emptying whatever, how many, I don't know, what do they empty, 20 at a time or something? Um, I can ask the winemaker what for the spec that I want. We want like a maximum of 7 or 8 years. If they get up to 10 years with the wine in there, they're too saturated, and we want them in good condition. Not that have sort of gone off that they're getting rid of them because they've got Brett in them or something like that. Um, and yeah, it's red or white wine. It's nice if you know the grape, because people always ask that. However, I challenged the person to know, whether it was a Merlot, a Syrah, or a Pinot Noir once the whiskey was in there. But we tend to go Pinot Noir because New Zealand's fairly famous for Pinot Noir, and it sounds good with the whiskey, whether you can actually taste the difference or not. Um, but it is a light white that I do feel like that works really well with the whiskey. So yeah, it's important to have the relationship with the winemakers, and I can get them fresh. So I can get them fresh that day.
Delivered to my door.
Well, I have to go and get them actually, but get in the van, go and get them, and then bring them back, hot wash them and fill them straight away. Or I can fill them straight away on the cask, straight into the wine if I choose. Um, or I might open them up, scrape the tartrates off the inner layer. For anyone that doesn't know, some wines will build up a layer of crystals on the inside, which is tartaric acid, and it kind of looks like rock salt on focaccia bread, and it can,
It really does.
yeah, it
Yeah,
can,
you look at it. I've seen it with. I once physically opened a 80-year-old Spanish sherry fortified wine cask, and you just see this like salt crust layer looking thing. Yeah, it looks like it doesn't belong, but
yeah, it's mad that that is actually in the wine. Like,
yeah,
wine's sort of crazy stuff compared to whiskey.
yeah, it
But
really is.
yeah, wine's sort of mysterious. But essentially what I'm saying is that we can avoid burning a sulfur candle, and so if there's tartaric acid in there, the tartrates don't actually taste like anything. I have actually put a bit in my mouth now. It's quite neutral, but you need to get rid of it so that the whiskey can access the wood. So we can get them, pull the heads off, scrape the tartrates out, hot wash them, and fill. So we've got them fresh, and we know the casks were good. And that's taken a bit of time. I have had to redistill casks. I had to redistill a whole pack of 12 that I got from a winemaker who I'm friends with.
Not fun.
Told me the bad.
So with all your wine single cask, Barry's asking, do you do STR process on the barrels, or you pretty much primarily fill them wet?
It depends on the whiskey. But for the smoky ones, I would tend to go for STR.
Okay.
And so for STR, I would pull the heads off, sort of hot wash it to get rid of a bit of wine, because we don't want mold can go really quickly on the wine. But pull the heads off so it can start to dry out, and have it elevated. If you've got them standing upright like that, not on their side. Like elevate them on a couple of sticks so air can get through. Um, Shave off the inside, and then heat it up with a burner underneath to get the deep toast happening, and then char, not to an alligator char, but just so the surface is black and starts to break. And I find that works pretty well. I do
Yeah,
like,
nice.
do like STR cut.
Yeah, interesting. I will say we'll move on to the next whiskey in a sec, but I will say your comment about smoky whiskey in white wine casks, I highly would suggest investing into that. There's a
Yeah.
distillery here in Victoria called Backwoods up in Yakandanda, and they did a smoked Chardonnay single malt, and it was one of the best whiskeys probably that I've had this year. Or last year, I can't remember when they released it, but it's, your brain is so confused in the best way possible. You're like, ooh, sweet but fruity but smoky. And then yeah, Rob as well, Byron, Cape Byron Distillery has a peated Chardonnay as well. I'm more partial to like the Viognier and stuff like that, but Chardonnay works really well with smoky whiskey. I think it's that like oakiness and that butteriness that a lot of people taste from Chardonnay. I don't like Chardonnay. It's not a wine style I like, but I like it once a smoky whiskey's been
It's
in it.
not my wine either. It
Yeah.
just happens that within, like, it's probably 2 kilometers away or something, is one of the most famous Chardonnay wineries. And the winemaker's amazing, and he does make good wine, but it wouldn't be my
It's not
first
what you
choice of
reach
grape.
for.
Oh,
Yeah. I think it's one of those things, it can totally be dependent on the winery. Like, I'm not a Sauvignon Blanc fan either, but there's a winery out west in Hamilton with this one guy, and he makes the best goddamn Sauvignon Blanc I've ever had, and I will only buy it from him. But yeah, it's like, just I don't touch it the rest of the time. And yeah, getting a really great winery, especially for the style, is really cool. So tell us a bit about this Allier. Is that
yeah.
is that the correct way to say it? The single cask?
This is LEA. So that's a region in France, and that French oak casks are really amazing, in that they say where the forest that the oak came from, the toast and the tightness of the grain and things. So this was a I think it was a Pinot Noir cask from the but the wood was from the LEA region, which is the most common. That I think a lot of American oak is used in Australian wine, but of the three wineries that I use, they use all French oak. I would like some American oak because it toasts so well. Um, but anyway, this is really good. So this is a real funky one.
Yeah, like straight away on the nose, I was like, oh, she's different. It
Yeah.
was totally, night and day from the Martin.
Yeah, to the mutton, a lot more refined. Now this one, we got funk greenhouse, like when you're in a greenhouse that's it's all kind of moist and damp, and you've got the kind of undergrowth, hay, Anzac biscuits. Maybe like the funk, good English or French country cider's got a bit of funk in it as well.
Yeah, I think the technical term for them is arf and arf.
Oh yeah,
In the UK, it's like a half sweet, half dry cider style. It's on the nose. It reminds me of like mashed pears, like when you get really overripe pears.
yeah.
Um, I mean, you can. I love pear juice. It's a very Italian thing, and I can't wait to gorge myself on it when I go back. But yeah, it's got this like, yeah, that earthy but fruity roundness to it, but it's quite viscous on the
Mm.
nose.
It is, and if we look at the legs are good, strong. Big. The stills are quite small. We're copper pot stills, 1800 litre wash still, and it's 1,000 litre spirit still. The running volumes normally 1,600 litres in the wash still, and normally about 750, 800 litres in the spirit still. And worm condensers, and both the stills are direct fire gas, so it's the most traditional setup. More traditional would be direct fire coal, but it yeah, I love that we've got a really traditional setup, but we make a contemporary product.
Mm. That's super interesting as well. And I love Rob's moist and undergrowth sells it to me every time. He's loving it. I love it too. I think it really hides the smoke that's on the palate from the nose. You're
Yeah,
like getting that funkiness from the nose, but then you take a sip and you're like, wow, that like ashy, lovely smoke, salty profile kind of
yeah.
really comes through.
salty, and then marmalade, a bit with that funk sort of translates, sweet zest, orange marmalade, raisin, Macintosh toffees. Um,
Mm. So with the gas fires still, is there I'm not sure how many people are familiar in the chat. There was an incident in Tasmania where they had a open flame still. I cannot recall if it was gas or like a regular open flame or whatever. And there was an incident. So we're much more on safety now. Is that is there a lot more ability to use those more traditional methods in New Zealand? Is there much in the way of regulation or, restrictions or whatnot?
the regulation is, it's different, but it's the same. We use the same code, but um, it's contradictory code. It's really hard to interpret. I think Australia is probably ahead, partly because of that incident. That incident was really scary. I actually went to a talk at the New Zealand Spirits Conference, not this year, but the previous year. A guy from that distillery who amazingly actually his background was an ambulance driver.
Yeah, so Adam Pinkard from Adam's Distillery.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's a amber paramedic. Also the biggest human I think I've ever met.
he could do such a good talk.
Yeah.
Like talking through a story. It he could really hold the audience. But I mean, you feel the tragedy for him as an ambulance driver, and he couldn't help this guy. What had happened was he actually hadn't followed protocol. A guy working there had heated the still up with the water component in it, and then gone to get ethanol from outside to put in there, but they needed to use the forklift, and maybe the LPG bottle was gone from the forklift, so they needed to replace it, or something like that. There are a few things that added to him taking too long. Where the procedure was actually to add the ethanol and the water. This is for making gin. There was a small gin still. The procedure was for them to mix it, put it in, close the lid, turn the gas burner on. But he had put the gas burner on, had boiling water in there, and then he added ethanol on top where the boiling point is low.
Oh,
So it instantly vaporized and caught on fire because it had a flame underneath it. And the guy was burnt head to toe.
yeah. He is okay, by the way. The employee at Adams is okay. Just as a FYI, if
Mm.
anyone was wondering. But yeah, no, it was a I think a lot of distilleries kind of moved away from, that a lot of distilleries in Australia anyway, kind of, started rethinking about using
Yeah,
more like electric, still powered methods.
it is. I mean, it was a tragedy. That accident. It scared the hell out of me when I heard that story, because we've been, Thomson Whisky has been running for quite a while now, so we've been running with gas for a while. You go, God. So I like the concept of it, and also there's cognac. I believe it's cognac stills have to be run direct fire gas, or it's not called cognac. There's a slight sort of burn, like toffee, like caramelizing that can happen. Glenfarclas is direct fired gas, and they make amazing whiskey. So we will see how it goes with that. Of course, direct fire gas isn't very efficient in that you do get a lot. The stills are jacketed, but you do get heat loss through the flue and things, and so for energy conservation. Um, so there's multiple, like, why you don't want to be direct fire gas, why you don't want to be, the health and safety and things like that. So we will see how things go. Currently, concept wise, it's good, and I think it makes really great whiskey. But there could be reasons that we shift away from it, which we've just discussed. Um,
Yeah, at the moment, the kind of it's that toss up of, you know, uh, those wanting those traditional methods and the flavor profile it produces, you know, and I mean, you guys already do a lot of really work with a lot of interesting
Our
stuff.
distillery is quite different setup to that. Like that was a little gin still that was running with a burner underneath. The spirit collection room is actually next door, so that the stills both heat up in the room with the stills. They go through the wall to bunded area where it's not, so vapor can't be in the room where the burners are. So it is well thought out, I hope. Well, so I mean it's been running for quite a while now. But yeah, we'll see in the future. There could be energy conservation reasons that we would, I'm always looking at different options. Um, there's different reasons why you might do things as well. Worm condensers, it's hard to recover the heat from. That's the most traditional condenser. Also, there's less copper contact, but you can get quite a sort of meaty spirit from the worm condenser. So I like that they're traditional, but it's possible that we'd shift to shell and tube for other reasons. You just make the best whiskey that you can.
Yeah, you do what you can. You find what work.
Theorize the gear that's going to, give you the flavor that you want, and then you go for it. And then as a still maker myself, because I actually made the wash still, I did the hand beating work in it, and I studied art and design, and I worked for 20 years in the film industry before starting the whiskey business. So I've made a lot of props and things, and I'm quite good at making stuff. So I'm always thinking about still designs and things.
Yeah, cool. Well, I love the comments in the chat as well about the Allier. Michael says it's really pleasant, could sit down for a little session on a sunny afternoon in the garden. We're apparently not getting that anymore in Melbourne because it just started raining again. Yeah, so Barry says it's very interesting, delicious. I like the salty finish. Some malty oaky nuttiness on a dry finish. Yeah, really good. Rob says this is great. Yeah, amazing. Ian's got a question, which is kind of a bit of an odd technical one, and we might get into it in a minute after we get on to the next whisk.
We better go on to Manuka Smoke because I realized that I'm rabbiting on about things.
No, it's great. It's always so informative to get like a peek behind the curtain about how it all kind of comes to be, and the small choices that are made. I mean, people are like, a lot of distillers will say, it's the water and the barley and the oak that make a difference in whiskey. And I'm like, well, no. I mean, the still shape, the still size, how it's powered, and this, all these small little things add up to make it. But yeah, and that's really cool. You made your own still. I will say, as soon as you said you worked in film and television, my first thought was like, doesn't everyone in New Zealand? You guys were all in the Lord of the Rings movies. It's on everyone's resume.
And so I'll just get that's the Manuka Smoke Single Malt label. A lot of people ask about what is the label design. It's an abstraction of, if you think of there, they're like that abstraction of an ear of barley, and then it comes from a pattern. The idea when we were doing the label was, whiskey's old, it's from another time, but we weren't making a whiskey that was like from 200 years ago. So I was looking at the deco designs, old but not that old. Okay, so in New Zealand, the most common wood for smoking is Manuka wood. It's a flowering tree which is famous for Manuka honey, but it's a tree that grows on the edge of the forest or when the forest is regenerating, and it doesn't grow very big. They might grow to maybe 4 meters tall, maybe, with about a 15 centimeter, 6-inch trunk would be sort of about as big as they'd get. And they're a little bit sort of wobbly, so you'd never get a good plank out of them. Essentially, they're really good for cutting up for firewood, and it's a really hard wood, and it burns well and tastes really good. So although peat exists in New Zealand, we that tree there, so that's one. They grow much bigger than that, but they're a small tree. They've got a white flower or a pinky flower, Um, and truth is, actually, I don't know that bees like the flower so much because they're so small. Um, but they'll harvest the nectar from those if there's a lot of them around. Um, it's got a different antibacterial note. I think in nearly all honeys in the world, the antibacterial note is um, acetone. No, what is that? Anyway, whatever. It's different. It's different in Manuka. It's the antibacterial thing that's different in the honey. Which incidentally, New Zealand honeybees live in the ground and don't produce. Sorry, New Zealand bees don't produce honey. They eat the nectar at the time. It wasn't until European honeybees came in 1839 that honey was produced in New Zealand. It wasn't produced before that. So lemon icing. This is a note that came directly from Australia, from Rachel coming over that time. No one had ever picked lemon in our Manuka Smoke Whisky before. And then Rachel came back saying, 3 people said lemon. I was like, oh, we normally like say cinnamon and clove.
Yeah, I think the first time I tried it, the first thing out of my mouth was champagne ham. You know, and you get that like lovely champagne ham from the deli. It's that
Yeah.
soft meatiness.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound too crazy to describe ham that
No,
way.
definitely not. So it's a subtle smoke, and you're getting there's a lot of oil content in the wood, and you can indeed make Manuka oil, which would be like a medicinal oil. So you get this oil carryover in the spirit that kind of tastes foody, like smoke, like you're talking about ham. It's kind of fatty. Again, the legs on this are really good, and because of that oil carryover. So mossy wood, homemade lemon icing, wet smoke. It's got a sort of mineral kind of saltiness to it. Um, garden mulch was one of the notes we threw in there. Oh,
Yeah, definitely getting that minerality and like a little touch of European sardines, that like
yeah,
salty,
yeah,
fishy deliciousness, that fattiness.
yeah.
Barry's getting medicinal lozenges on the nose. Rob loves it as a base for an old fashioned, 100%. Yes, fabulous.
Mm.
Rob's
We
getting
actually
this.
started making, and we started making a mint julep with it.
Oh, that
Which
sounds
you
good.
wouldn't think, but actually the mint is yum. Um, and because we're going sort of earthy. The note that New Zealanders always vibe off if you say walking through the bush after it rained for this.
Yeah,
I mean, I imagine walking in the Australian forest. Um, I mean, maybe you're getting eucalypt and stuff in the Australian forest, which isn't eucalypt, but
I think it depends which forest. So Victorian forests are pretty uh pine driven, I think. I'm not certain. I can't remember. There's not too crazy amounts, but yeah, I believe the technical chemical compound for that is ozone. Um, it's like that ozone chlorophyll kind of that the plants express and whatnot. It's very
yeah.
oxygen heavy. Rob says it doesn't rain here. Rob's in a very dry, arid part of Australia.
The other note was tobacco pouch, like some Port Royal or something like that. Open
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Ian's got it absolutely right. Petrichor is the name that they call the smell after it's rained. Petrichor.
oh, cool.
Mm. Yeah, definitely getting that. We got some really great questions as well. Ollie popped in to ask if you can smoke meat with Manuka wood.
Oh, yeah, yeah, definitely. It's incredibly common in New Zealand. Like you can go into any Mitre 10 or Bunnings and buy Manuka wood smoking chips. So it absolutely makes sense that if you were making a smoky whiskey, you would use Manuka wood. There's other woods that in New Zealand are famous for smoking or good. It's not Manuka is by far the most famous. Um, but internationally, like no one's heard of, like I could do a Pahutakawa smoked whiskey, but sure no one's ever heard of that. Whereas the New Zealand honey industry has done me a big favor in pushing forward a sort of premium wood or premium tree, but that is by far the most sort of common and respected. It's like, most whiskey casks are made from oak, right? There's only a few like chestnut and beech or whatever. Most smoking would be Manuka wood. And it's great for smoking, salmon and bacon and things. Yeah,
That's just making me hungry. That all sounds amazing. Um, yeah, and I imagine, it's definitely uncommon. I think last night in the tasting we had a mulberry wood cask finished whiskey as well. That was a intriguing time. Yeah, I'll have to send you some of it. But Barry's got a great little question here. How often do you run the stills? Obviously, you're a smaller distillery, but I mean, in the
so
grand scheme of things, but yeah.
we're normally running the stills lately twice a week. So that would be like one distillation is about a barrel, like a 200-litre barrel. So we don't have any investors and we run off cash flow, which I really like, actually. We've had a few people approach us over the years, but I like being my own man and doing what I want and owning my own brand. So we, if we sell more whiskey, then we produce more whiskey. So I guess when we're running, I guess we have the potential to run 7 days, but when things are going well, we're running 4 days a week, with a day for cleaning. But lately we've been doing 2 days a week, so 2 barrels a week. So we could produce 6 barrels a week, I think. So yeah, that would be sort of comfortable 6-day production kind of thing.
Yeah, fair enough. Barry's also got another question later. What cask type is this Manuka Smoke? Is it red wine?
No, it's an ex-Jack Daniels.
Okay.
I've got a good source for them through another distillery in New Zealand, brings them in, who's a little bit bigger than us. But it works out well because that means we get them fresher. Like I could bring in a container of it turns out actually most ex-bourbon barrels are Jack Daniels in New Zealand for that very reason, that if we're sort of all bringing them in, then they're fresher rather than us individually bringing in like 40-foot containers and taking a while to fill those. Which is good. Jack Daniels, I believe, is 4 years in the cask. One's like, say Woodford Reserve, maybe they're 6 or 7 years in the cask. You're better off, in my opinion, with a younger American whiskey in that you've got more oak left in there. If you get, I don't know if the bourbon rules are 2 years old. I don't know, some of the I don't know. I feel like the Jack Daniels barrels are pretty good. Like I feel like the Jack Daniels kind of flavor, the toffee notes and stuff in there are sort of good to carry over. So I feel like they work really well. And they work well when you rechar them as well. So yeah, that's what we use.
Yeah, cool. Michael also asked what was the choice behind the black bottles for the whiskey?
Oh, well, I'm a smoked whiskey lover, and so if you look at Islay malts, a lot of them are dark. It's not actually black. It's just you can actually see through it, and we buy them as antique green bottles. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, a lot of the whiskies that I drink would be in dark bottles, and I just like the idea of a dark bottle originally. Also, you can get flocking because we don't chill filter, and because it's quite an oily spirit, if the temperature drops, what happens? The oils will drop out of suspension and it will look cloudy, and then they'll all knock into each other and join up, and then fall to the bottom over a period of time. But it'll look like desiccated coconut in the bottom. So it adds it takes away a little bit of risk, because if someone sees, bits in the bottom, then they might complain. You can, we have actually had that happen, you can shake it back into solution. So that's one. Also, I mean, most people do use clear bottles, and I sort of like it as a point of difference that we use the dark bottle. So yeah, it was just a style choice, and then we've got for special releases we use the clear so you can see the whiskey.
Yeah, cool. We're pretty familiar with flock here and flocculation here at the Whiskey List. Particularly, we've done some bottlings with Overeem Distillery down in Tasmania that are literally like the bottom of it, and so they're quite heavily flocked.
Yeah.
So they're very cloudy, very creamy whiskeys and whatnot. I will say, when you do get like a little floaty of oils that have stuck together, and it's this kind of like weird floating thing in suspension, be like, okay, maybe not, maybe might be a bit too far. But yeah, I like that it's a nice little, plus it like you said, it's a point of difference. Barry says, you've got the All Blacks, the New Zealand, the flag and the rugby team and all that. You're kind of drawing a little bit on those themes, I suppose.
Yeah, well, people might conclude that the truth. I had one of the original bottles kicking around. The truth is that this is the original bottle. This is the original bottle, and you can see it's actually green.
Yeah.
This was a 750 ml bottle, but we switched to this, which I prefer the shape actually. This is 700 ml. See, essentially we were giving away 50 mls because most whiskey is 700 mls. Do you know what I mean? So you've got to compete for price point, but but this is kind of fatter bottle. This is the French made bottle. These are Italian. This is a better shape, looks better, and it's darker, which I actually preferred. You might, so I guess unconsciously, it wasn't a conscious decision to be like the All Blacks, but it was meant to be a kind of dark brooding kind of drink, more like Nick Cave influenced actually. If we, the influence is more Australian.
Yeah, I love that. Cool. Well, people are loving the Manuka Smoke. It's so good. Michael says lovely light smoked honey notes, sweet and juicy. Yeah, the oil is fantastic. Super good. Ewan's asking if have you thought about getting together with other New Zealand distilleries to produce a film documentary, since apparently everyone there has a background in movies. I mean, that would be fun. Obviously, I think we can exclude Greg Ramsay from New Zealand Whiskey Co. Not only for being Australian, but also for, I love him to pieces, but the man is the least organized human being I know on the planet. He is so sweet, which is why he gets away.
Tell a good story though. Yeah, he's a good dude, Greg. Have we thought of, well, I make props and film sets and stuff, so whether I don't know what to do in the film, but we will see. There's a book on New Zealand whiskey actually. Can I even see it? Yeah, actually, we'll talk a little bit about New Zealand history of New Zealand whiskey. I'll just get the book.
Yeah, no worries. If everyone wants to pour whiskey number 5, the South Highland Peat as well, get cracking into that. New Zealand whiskey book. Oh, that's so cute.
And it's almost impossible to read. It's not very exciting reading. But this was written, I think, in about 1981. So the history of whiskey in New Zealand, we had in the 1860s a distillery, the Auckland distillery. No, it was the New Zealand distillery in Dunedin and the Auckland distillery in Auckland, something like that. And amazingly, I was talking to a, a historian from the South Island. So Dunedin is the old name for Edinburgh. And a lot of Scots came over to Dunedin and they were setting up a sort of Presbyterian, would you say, not utopia, I don't know, but it's sort of really organized, honest, I don't know, hardworking people. Interestingly, the sort of mirrors the Highland clearances, Scots coming over here, and the sheep that you know how sheep farming in the Highlands meant that the landowners now could use it for sheep farming, and they didn't need people living there as military service, so they sent people off their ancestral lands. Well, they came to New Zealand, particularly the Dunedin and the South Island, and started sheep farming here. Maori had actually arrived in New Zealand at around 1250, and they burnt the entire forest down of the whole country. And unlike, it's within the first 200 to 300 years, that's the biggest time of extinctions in New Zealand. 36 of the 45 extinctions that have happened in the first 200 to 300 years. They also introduced rats and dogs. That we had lots of flightless birds, and so the burning of the forest was for chasing out flightless birds. And so we had a bird called a moa, which was bigger than an ostrich. You know, that one's gone. That's the most famous one, but lots of birds as well. But the forest didn't grow back in parts of the South Island, and so it was actually really easy for the Dunedin settlers because they weren't cutting down trees like in the North Island. You had to clear the forest to build a settlement, but they could freely just farm there because it's grassland. Anyway, about that. From the Dunedin distillery, there's records of them importing peat all the way from Scotland. So this is in the 1870s. So we don't really have records of the whiskey they produced. However, they brought peat here, and we do have peat in the bottom of the South Island. So they could use local peat, but they obviously cared about the flavour of the whiskey enough to bring tons of peat from Scotland. And the other one we have is from a record during the gold rush in Dunedin, where they'd sent a order to Scotland, to Campbelltown, saying, send us the best and the oldest whiskey that you have. So although you might think of the area sort of in the late 1800s as being full of rough kind of settlers, obviously they actually were thinking about flavour, that they would want the good stuff, you know. But also at the time, I mean, in the latter half of the 1800s, Ireland was the biggest producer of whiskey in the world and produced 60% of the world's whiskey. So actually, Irish not smoky whiskey was the common flavour. However, the Scots preferred the smoke, and that's what was in that was what was there. So this is leading this whiskey now. So because the maltsters had built a smoking facility to make Manuka Smoke Malt, I asked them to produce a peat smoke whiskey, which they didn't. They could the peat smoke malt, which they couldn't see as a viable product. So to commit to 5 tons at a huge amount of money, but they found some local peat and they smoked it, and this is the result. Yeah, that was a long story.
Is it, yeah, it's really cool. And so for frame of reference as well, you guys are based on the North Island, just north of Auckland, yeah?
Correct.
Yeah. So is it difficult to, I mean, I'm sure it's no more difficult than shipping peat all the way from Scotland, but is it easier to kind of sort getting the peat from the South Island up that way? I
Oh,
have
no, the
never been
maltsters,
to New Zealand, as you can probably tell.
the maltsters are in the South Island, but the story with that was they said that they didn't have any peat, right? So we can buy peat from the garden centre, like commonly, right? So I bought a bale of Auckland peat and sent it to them. And I think it was like an insult to South Islanders because it was like, oh, but he sent us some Auckland turf, bastards. And so within a week, they'd found a peat source anyway that was local to them. So that pushed the issue. So we got our peated whiskey. So this would be the first New Zealand peated whiskey in over 100 years.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. I mean, yeah, Michael said already it's taking me to Isla. I get like a dirty lychee lolly sweetness to it on the nose a little bit, but
No, it is sweet.
yeah.
And this is like a Highland malt. If you think of a Highland peated malt, like a Benriach.
Or an Ardmore or something like that, yeah.
Yeah, as opposed to a pungent Islay whiskey because it's inland peat. And I mean, we're not. This is kind of the beginning of the peat journey, really. It's working with the maltsters, with the first peated malt. But this is also a significant thing which you don't realize outside of New Zealand is that we buy New Zealand smoked malt, whereas in the rest of the world it's not common to be able to purchase locally local barley that's been malted and smoked in that country. So you've got also Canterbury, which is on the east coast of the South Island, has a number of world records for the highest yield of barley per hectare. So it's bang on the right environment. It's the North Island where I am is a bit wet and a bit warm, but then it needs to be like cold and crisp for growing the barley. So New Zealand does work out to be a good country for making single malt whiskey in.
Yeah. Yeah, like Michael said as well in the chat, Bakery Hill's currently importing some New Zealand peated malt, but I think they also import some Scottish peated malt as well. The guys at Fleury are bringing in Scottish peated malt, so it's it'd be interesting to see if more Aussie distilleries could source from New Zealand as well. Could be interesting.
Yeah. Oh, when I went to Redlands, I did a Tasmanian tour like about 12 years ago, probably, when Redlands was starting out. They had a smoker there for post-smoking the malt, but that would mean that the smoke was very fresh. And I think there's a bit of that done, which I think is also a good idea. Because smoke does dissipate. If the smoke malt's been sitting around for a while, you definitely notice the decline. So that's good. See, I mean, I do like if you, I do like that the malt comes from that ideally, so I guess personally I prefer to buy Australian whiskey that was Australian barley and smoked in Australia, um so but I mean it's good. I oh, hang on. I actually wrote the rules for New Zealand whiskey. The rules were quite loose years ago, and it did get debated whether New Zealand whiskey had to be New Zealand grain. But I argued the point that, well, one, the maltsters, there's only two of them would have a duopoly, but also you might want to do a cool project like you could get some Australian malted barley versus New Zealand, or Scotch peated malt versus New Zealand. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's also important to be able to bring in grain for making whiskey as well.
Yeah, you don't want to restrict. It's that balance between allowing experimentation, but also having like a really kind of set guideline so that people aren't going crazy outside the bounds and whatnot. So, well, we might finish on the last whiskey of the tasting, the Full Noise Manuka Smoke. I mean, I don't really want to leave the South Island peat. I think that's absolutely phenomenal, and probably my personal favorite of the tasting.
Oh, nice, really nice one.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's that it, like you said, it's that Highland smoked malt, um, like single malt vibe that I definitely personally resonate with. But I am keen to have this. I think I got to try one of the very early progress report Manuka Thompsons. So it's been really thrilling to kind of see how the Manuka smoke has evolved and how your own peat has evolved and whatnot. But yeah, onto the Full Noise. So is this the classic Manuka smoke, just cask strength or single cask, or?
Oh, thank you for asking.
Yeah.
No, it's slightly different. So if full noise would be likely four casks, three ex Jack Daniels, one wine cask. So it's like a quarter full oak. And the wine cask would be one that would previously put something else in to pull off the initial wine flavors, but so you're getting a bit of the French oak tannins, you know?
Mm.
And I believe, what were our official notes on this one? Orange, fig, not fig on the nose though, but orange, orange marmalade, smoked cut grass. Kind of minerality as well. Sea salt.
I'm getting on the nose. I don't know whether it's Halloween's coming up, so my brain's got that on stuck in my head. But it's got this kind of, if you've ever had candy corn, it's this like odd sweet cereal kind of note. Um, and it's one of those candies that's like it shouldn't exist, but it does exist. And I do like it, but in small quantities. And it's got, yeah, it's just got such a interesting. I'm definitely getting that orange on the nose as well. Mm.
Yeah, so yeah, orange marmalade. Um, I guess this one, because the original Manuka smoke is lemon, I guess this one's orange. Um, and I think it's the French oak that makes the difference.
Yeah. Barry agrees. I'm not crazy. Smoked candy corn. it's such a it's such a bizarre thing. I always see it coming up around Halloween, Thanksgiving time at the USA food store here, and I'm like, don't spend money on it. You're not going to eat it all. But I want to. I want to so bad. Rob says that this works well in a Boilermaker with the Atherall Australian Pale Ale, which he's currently indulging in at the moment. I love that. Rob says, "Oh wow, makes me glad I have a bottle. The 56% is a real winner." Yeah, I think that it gives such a full body of flavor to the Manuka, and you get that like oaky smoke coming through really, really well with that extra ABV.
Hmm. Thanks. Yeah. And again, yeah, it's I quite like that we've got two different smokes because we've just tried peat smoke, which is more of a sort of traditional, like what we'd associate with smoke, like a sort of granular smoke or something. You can sort of taste the charcoal or something. Whereas this is like oily, like wet, kind of.
Yeah, it's got that so like when you're making cocktails and whatnot, sometimes you'd have the orange peel and you'd have a little lighter and you'd squeeze
Yeah.
the oil
Exactly.
through the light and to get that like burnt orange oil
Yeah.
onto the cocktail, and it's very much that, and it's one of the best smells in the world, but it's
Mm.
tricky to perfect. Like you gotta be a real smarty with like this is the exact kind of peel to have and whatnot, and this is how thick it should be. But yeah, I mean that was amazing. I'm going to run the poll now. So as we do with all our tastings, we run a poll. You can pick your top two favorite whiskeys of the night. Matt, you should be able to see it as well. Don't give any of it away.
Everyone will just pick two-tone, you know.
Yeah. I will say the first whiskey in the lineup usually always loses out, just because it's been kind of so long since people go back to it. So, you know, there's always a little bit of balancing afterwards for the first whiskey of the night. But yeah, you and I can see it. It's but the other guys can't. I love watching it move. It's always super fun. But also, in addition to the poll, I have been granted the discount code from Ollie and the team. So we've got a sneaky 10% off Old Thomson on the Whiskey List shop tonight for you guys. So I think that link will take you through to the page that has all the Thomsons on it. I think we don't have the Allier, much to Rob's sadness. But yeah, it's we've got a lovely little discount for you guys tonight for hopping on. Ollie might share it again later in the wrap-up email, but we'll see. So yeah, alrighty. I think we've got, I think 100% of people answered. I always forget because it's like who are the last 3 people? Oh, me, Ollie, and Matt. Always forget that. So drum roll, but also coming from the very back, the final whiskey has absolutely blown everybody away. The Full Noise taking the gold here, followed by the South Island Peat and then the Allier single cask. Absolutely great. Still a vote for the Manuka Smoke and the two-tone, but yeah, I think the Full Noise Manuka Smoke just absolutely. Michael's showing off his bottle, tempting everyone.
That's great. No, I really appreciate that from people as well. And that you know, making the Manuka Smoke whiskey has been a long time kind of labor of love. I started smoking barley on my barbecue like back in 2005, and working out how to use the flavor, and say wine cask and Manuka Smoke isn't a great combo, whereas American oak is, but then working, you know, being you know, partially aging in wine, you know, getting some French oak and things, you know, this flavor is good, but how do we make it really good? Or it's, you know, so it's great that you know, I'm really happy that everyone liked the Full Noise, and it looks like they like the whiskies Allier as well, you know. So
yeah, no, obviously fantastic. Barry's asking if it was possible to purchase the Allier somewhere in Australia, and yeah, I think Ollie's responded, but yeah, not yet. Possibly early next year. I think we will be emailing Matt and Rachel with our next order and next shipment. So
yeah, we can hold some back. We can hold some back for you guys for the next shipment. And when you've got it, air freight's quite expensive. So, you know, someone could purchase it direct from us, but you're probably better off waiting until you've got it in stock in Australia.
Yeah, I think like they apply customs to New Zealand to import stuff and then shipping and everything. It's a bit confusing.
I've had stuff go down the rabbit hole of customs arriving in Australia. They're real pain.
Yeah, it's risky and not worth it. You're better off muling it yourself across the border, as I've learned from my trips. But yeah, I think that that officially concludes our tasting tonight. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Matt, for hopping on and telling us more about whiskey and how it's made, the history of New Zealand whiskey, which I think that often gets overlooked. I will be trying to find a copy of that book you've got, or perhaps borrowing yours. But thank you so much, everyone, for joining. We will see you at the next virtual tasting. Take care. Matt, if you wanted to stay on for a little debrief with Ollie and I, that would be wonderful. I don't know how the time zone differences are, but I don't know.
This is right. But thank you so much, everyone, for being part of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Take care.